Good evening and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum at the Institute of Politics. My name is Mira Sholivar. I'm a sophomore at the college studying applied math and biology, and I'm a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee. Before we begin, please note the exit doors, which are located on both the park side and the JFK Street side of the forum. In the event of an emergency, walk to the exit closest to you and congregate in the JFK Park. Please also take a moment now to silence your cell phones and join me in welcoming Harvard College undergraduate Andres DeMarco.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Andres DeMarco. I'm a first year at the college and also a member of the JFK Forum Committee. Tonight, we have the pleasure of hearing from Scott Jennings, an expert in political strategy and communications. Jennings began his career in his home state of Kentucky as the political director for George W. Bush's 2000 campaign, and later joined his 2004 campaign as the executive director in New Mexico, helping to flip that state for a Republican for the first time since 1988. Following the campaign in 2004, he joined President Bush's administration in 2005, where he served as special assistant to the president and advised on 2 confirmation processes for Supreme Court justices. Since then, he has advised numerous federal, state, and local campaigns, most notably for Senator Mitch McConnell. Jennings worked on McConnell's 3 campaigns in 2002, 2008, and 2014, and is a close advisor to the former Senate Majority Leader. Drawing on his extensive political expertise and understanding of Republican politics, Jennings joined CNN as an on-air political commentator in 2017 and currently serves as a columnist for the Louisville Courier-Journal and the Los Angeles Times. In 2018, he was appointed a resident fellow at the Harvard Institute of Politics here at the Kennedy School and remained involved as an adjunct lecturer, teaching a class at the Kennedy School called Modern American Political Campaigns on campaign organization and management. In addition to his media and education roles, Jennings advises national and international clients on media relations and political strategy as the founder of RunSwitch, Kentucky's largest public relations firm. This conversation will be moderated by Setti Warren, director of the Institute of Politics and adjunct lecturer in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. He previously served as mayor of Newton, Massachusetts from 2010 to 2018 and was the first African American to be a popularly elected mayor in Massachusetts. Warren has had an extensive career in public service, serving as special assistant in the White House Office of Cabinet Affairs for President Bill Clinton, as New England director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and as Deputy State Director for Senator John F. Kerry. Prior to running for mayor, Warren completed a year-long tour of duty in Iraq as a Navy intelligence specialist. Please join me in welcoming Scott Jennings and Setti Warren to the stage for tonight's forum.
Well, Scott, welcome back to the IOP and the Kennedy School. It's great to sort of have you back home here. So welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to jump right into the conversation, Scott. You work for President Bush. You work for Senator McConnell. And now we've had President Trump elected twice. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, how has the Republican Party changed over that period of time?
Well, great question, and thank you all for being here, and thanks for having me back today. I had a great experience when I was here in the IOP and teaching my class here. My co-professor was Ravi Mook, and we had a great exchange of civil discourse in the classroom, and it was a cherished experience for me. So I get asked this question a lot. You know, what is the ideology of the Republican Party? How do you go from Bush to McConnell to Romney to Trump? And you know, I think some things have changed. Certainly every president, every presidential candidate puts their imprimatur on his or her party's platform. And that's absolutely been true for Trump. You know, obviously he has a different view of tariffs, for instance, than previous Republicans that I had worked for. But policy changes aside, I do think there's a through line for most Republicans. You know, back home in Kentucky, most Republicans that I know voted for Bush twice, McConnell several times, and on and on. And I think the through line is actually today more clear to me than it has ever been. And that is that the Republican Party is the party, in my opinion, that best defends Western civilization. And on top of that, I think if you want another reason that I am comfortable with the direction of the Republican Party, it's that we have, by and large, stood up for free speech. But I think apart from our political battles day to day, this policy, that policy, to me, the future of the West is at stake. The battle is happening now, whether we like it or not. And I think my party is meeting the moment on a great many issues. But yes, some things have absolutely changed. Tactically, they've changed. Certainly, President Trump has imbued a fighting spirit in the Republican Party that I think a lot of grassroots Republicans perceived we had lost after the 2012 election, to be honest. And so one of the things that I think many Republicans admire about him is that he has attitudinally changed the willingness of the Republican Party to not just simply take it from the media or from the Democrats or from cultural actors who see the world differently than a conservative would.
Well, let me move to today. We're in the second day of a government shutdown. Both sides have a lot to gain, to lose. How do you think both sides will go, and what will it take to end this?
Well,
your perspective.
My assumption is that in the next few days, a few Senate Democrats will cave, and this shutdown will end. I don't know how long that will take, but I assume it will. I'm not sure why they did this, to be honest. I mean, I've lived through a lot of government shutdown brinksmanship in my career. I'm not entirely sure why Democrats are doing this right now. They had voted for CRs 13 times during the Biden years. These are Biden budget numbers. And the issue that they claim to care about, the Obamacare subsidies, don't end until the end of the year. They could be negotiated, and I assume they will be negotiated. My assumption is that the only tactical explanation for it is that they're responding to a base that is desperate to fight about anything. We need to see some fight out of you, Chuck Schumer. And that's what he's doing. But when you get into a fight, you need to have an exit strategy for one. And I'm not quite sure they have one at the moment. I can tell you this, Republicans are quite comfortable with their public relations position on this. It might be the first shutdown fight they win in my lifetime because they have earnestly tried to keep the government open with a clean CR, and no one can really dispute that. I also think this issue of taxpayer-funded health care benefits for illegal aliens wrapped into the larger conversation we're having about immigration in this country is a political winner for the president. And so to be in the middle of a shutdown over it and to be able to highlight these kinds of issues helps him, and I think it continues to plague the Democrats. But how does it end? I mean, eventually a couple of Senate Democrats are going to cave and try to work something out, and a lot of people are going to be wondering why this ever started in the first place. But I can tell you this, the Republicans are not letting any moment go to waste. I mean, President Trump met with the OMB director today about what government programs and offices and people can be cut. And so the people who cajoled the Democratic leadership into this shutdown may be regretting this in 2 or 3 weeks.
Let me move on to the issue of political violence. We know it's on the rise. The assassination attempts against President Trump, the attack on Paul Pelosi, the 2 Minnesota lawmakers that were murdered, and of course, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who I know you were close to. How do we reduce the violence on all sides?
Well, let me just talk about Charlie for a minute. I had just seen him a few days before. We had done an event together in Colorado, and we had had a long conversation in that event about the future of the West and the need for debates. I mean, how did he die? He died by talking and handing a microphone to someone who disagreed with him. So the system doesn't really work. Our democratic system doesn't really work if any of us from either persuasion, liberal or conservative, are afraid that after we espouse our views, somebody's going to shoot us. The net effect of that will be we'll stop speaking. But what Charlie stood for was more speech, more debate, more civil discourse. And so the way to defeat the rise of violence is words, not weapons. And I think Charlie, for a lot of conservatives, and especially a lot of young conservatives, was their first destination or entree into politics at all. So this has stunned the nation. I'm stunned. I was on the air on my radio show when it happened, and then I was on CNN when he passed away. Sort of lived through the emotional impact of it on the air with the audience. And I am quite concerned that there are a number of people in this country who have decided that for them, speech and debate have no meaning, and they've moved on to other methods. I mean, people are writing messages on the bullets. We have to take this seriously. I was in New York the other day when there was a crowd of people at the courthouse cheering on Luigi Mangione, an assassin, cold blood. And so I am quite concerned about this idea that this is now an acceptable way to solve your problem or to assuage your feelings or to, I don't know what you would call it, but it's radical and it's un-American and it's fundamentally anti-Western civilization. And so I go back to what I said at the beginning. I think the political violence issue we're having, the radicalism we're experiencing, comes from people who have just given up on the idea of what America was founded on. It's a nation founded on speech and debate. And so Charlie engages in speech and debate, which is what we always say we should do with each other, and they killed him for it. And so I think this has emotionally impacted a lot of young people. I'm reeling from it still. Every conservative I know is feeling a range of emotion from sadness to anger to disgust to resolve. The greatest good that could come from it, truthfully, if there is any, it is that there's going to be a rebirth of people who know how important it is to be involved in politics and who know how important it is to use your voice to make change in this country and not anything else. So the way forward is more speech, more debate, more conversation. That's the only way to defeat these forces, in my opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. What does the future of the Republican Party look like once President Trump is out of office? And is there anyone that will rise in the ranks of the party?
Yeah, I don't think you can replicate Donald Trump. I've spent a little time with him this year and observed him. I have a book coming out in November about roughly the first 100 days of this administration. And watching him operate privately, watching him operate publicly, watching his administration unfold, it's hard for me to imagine how you could replicate Trump, the politician. On top of that, I have some question about who could possibly hold together the coalition that he put together to win. It's amazing that he was able to come back the way he did. It's the greatest political comeback in American history, political history. Maybe the greatest comeback since Napoleon, but it is fundamentally remarkable what he did, and to try to ascribe that sort of talent to someone else is hard for me to envision. So where does it go from here? It would be shocking to me if J.D. Vance wasn't the nominee of the Republican Party, provided that he and the president have a good relationship and this president continues to be viewed by Republicans as operating in the way they approve of, which they overwhelmingly do. And so, Vice President Vance is going to have a chance to carry the movement forward. But carrying a movement forward or being the next man up is not the same as replicating Trump. I just don't think you can replicate it. And what does that mean? Maybe some people who were drawn to Donald Trump don't come back. I mean, one of the Republican Party's biggest political tactical issues is that a whole bunch of people show up in presidential campaigns to vote for Trump. They don't show up in midterms. They don't show up in special elections and other places. They like to vote for Trump. Will they vote for the next person for president that's not Trump? We don't know that yet. So as a tactical matter, that has to be solved if the Republicans are to retain the full coalition that Trump has been able to put together. J.D. Vance is I think, skillful person, but he's different than Trump, and he has a different skill set, and he has some different views on some policy issues. And it'll be his to shape. But to replicate it, near impossible.
I want to move out of Washington, D.C. We've got a race in New York for mayor. We've got a governor's race in Virginia. We've got a governor's race in New Jersey. From your perspective, what's at stake in these three races? What do they mean moving forward?
Well, I'll start with the New York City mayor's race, which I do believe Mamdani is going to win. I don't think it will set up in a way for him to lose. The fragmentation of it seems to be protecting him. Even though Adams did get out, I don't sense that's going to happen with the Sliwa there. I'm not a New Yorker, but I spend a lot of time there because of my work on CNN. I think for the Democrats in this race, they have more at stake than any of the other situations you mentioned, because if he
In
wins,
the New York race? In the New York race.
in the New York race,
Okay, got it.
than anything else, because if he wins, he is instantly going to become one of the most famous faces of the Democratic Party. And so at that moment, the Democratic Party will have almost all of its energy behind an avowed socialist. He says democratic socialist, it's a socialist, which may work fine in New York City, but I just don't think it's going to work all that well out in the country. And to me, that is, for a party that's already struggling with its image. I mean, you pick your poll, but it's 20, 30% image rating out there, really low, really low. You're going to tack something onto that that's going to seem fundamentally weird to most people outside of very, very blue areas. I also think it's going to have the impact of pulling existing Democratic leaders to the left when it may not be in their political best interest. And it's probably going to have the impact of pulling the Democratic presidential primary in 28 to the left. The counter argument to mine is, well, that's where the energy is. That's what the people want. This is what the constituency is asking for. Don't underestimate this. And I wouldn't underestimate some of the people who are following him, because I do think some of them have real concerns. Student debt, cost of living. I mean, these are not things to be dismissed.
Housing costs.
Of course. Of course. Yeah. In the same way that I think some people dismissed Donald Trump's followers in 2016. These are just hillbillies and rubes. They don't know anything. They had real concerns too. And they were dismissed, and Donald Trump became the president twice. So I think anytime you dismiss constituencies, you're in danger of missing the boat in politics. But just as an overall imaging matter and a tactical or public relations matter for the Democratic Party, they have more at stake here than anywhere because of what he will represent, both as an economic matter, his views on that, their relationship with Israel and the Jewish people. There's a lot at stake here from a messaging and policy direction for the Democrats. The gubernatorial races to me are interesting. Virginia has bounced back and forth. New Jersey, for me, is quite fascinating. It's got a red streak in it right now. It was closer than people realize in the presidential campaign in 2024. And so I would assume the odds makers would still put Democrats in favor in these two races. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in that New Jersey governor's race. I'm not convinced that a Republican can't win there. For Republicans, New Jersey is always a little bit of a, it's like you're in a desert and you see an oasis in the distance, and it turns out to be a mirage. I've lived through that a number of times in my life, but this time it feels like there may be a chance. Virginia's interesting. Popular Republican governor won on cultural and education issues 4 years ago, and I feel the Republicans are trying to
Youngkin.
Yeah, Youngkin, yeah. And they're trying to replicate that again, especially with what's going on in the Northern Virginia schools. That's counterbalanced against the federal population in Northern Virginia, who's probably unhappy to some degree. So, but to me, the implications for the party's image, for the Democrats especially, is really all wrapped up in this New York City mayor's race. And if he wins, Republicans will make sure everybody in the country knows his name and what he stands for.
President Trump has ordered National Guard troops to cities across the nation to reduce crime, has suggested using these cities as military training grounds. Some have been critical of this move on both sides of the aisle. Where do you see the situation headed?
Well, I think the reason he did it is because the American people have a real concern about crime in major American cities. He started in Washington, And even the mayor there has said it worked. It's not just the National Guard, though. There's also been a surge of other federal law enforcement resources.
Yep.
I think they work hand in hand. I don't know if any of you have been in Washington since this happened, but I've been around D.C. a lot in the last several weeks and have witnessed the National Guard having, a sort of a deterrent effect. I don't see them engaging too much in law enforcement activity. I do see them walking around. I do see them putting eyes and ears on the street, and I see the public interacting with them in quite a positive way. But I do think he's responding to a political issue, which is that people believe that in some places in America, crime's out of control and nobody's doing anything about it. So his political instinct is correct. I'm not sure National Guard is a permanent solution, but it does show the power of more law enforcement. More eyes and ears, more people on the street, keeping an eye on things is a deterrent. I think that has been proven. And so where this goes from here, I would hope that would spur some hiring in the federal and state and local ranks of law enforcement. There are many American cities where you have massive police shortages. And so getting more law enforcement on the street, I think the American people are probably fine with that. Particularly if you live in one of these cities where it's a little dangerous to go outside or get in a car. Some of this is also wrapped up in the immigration enforcement debate. And, the federal government is now in the process of hiring a massive number of ICE agents to keep up with their enforcement goals. And so I think the general direction of his policies are basically to say we just don't have enough law enforcement. And when you don't have enough law enforcement, criminals run amok. And I'm not going to stand for it. As a political matter, it's probably going to work out pretty well for him. But is permanent National Guard deployment? I don't see that in our future. I think it's a temporary solution, and I have been supportive of it. But long term, more permanent law enforcement, I think, is probably the answer.
I know there are a number of students in the audience that are thinking about getting into politics, running for office. We just sort of described the very complex environment that we live in here in the United States. I mentioned political violence. How would you advise someone that's thinking about this? How would you give them some guidance?
Engaging in politics is the greatest thing you could possibly do. Political operative is a good thing. The word politics is not dirty. Politics is a good thing. Speech is a good thing. Debate is a good thing. Running for office is a good thing. These are all parts of the system that are necessary for the country to function. To participate in it is a noble and high calling. I don't regret anything I ever did in politics. I cherish it. It was great to do when I was young. It's great to do now. And so if you're thinking of going into politics as a profession, I could not encourage it more. Be not afraid. Just do it. You will not regret it, even if you don't win. And I've certainly lived through my share of losses. It's not fun to lose. But when you look back on your life and you get involved in some campaign and you know that you made a difference in an election in the United States of America, it's like one of the greatest things you could carry with you for the rest of your life. To help somebody that you believed in achieve office and then to watch what they do, it's a beautiful thing. And so my advice is don't hesitate. And there are political campaigns all over the country, and there are people to believe in all over the country. I think most people who go into politics are fundamentally good and are fundamentally in it for the right reasons. Some aren't. Most are. Find a good one and go knock on some doors. See America. It's a good way to do it.
I've got a final question for you, and then I want to open things up. If folks would like to begin to line up at the microphones, there's two on the ground level, there's two in the loge boxes. We'll get to you in just a minute. So speaking of running for office, there have been some reports about you considering a run for the Senate in Kentucky. Can you share what your thoughts are about that race? Are you thinking about doing it?
Well, for those of you considering going into a life and career in politics, I wouldn't advise you to tell a person from Kentucky to go to Harvard and announce a Senate campaign.
So we're going
Not exactly what the people back in Kentucky are looking for. I have considered it, and it's been on my mind. I've received a lot of encouragement for it, and I'm flattered by it. I haven't made any public announcements about it. We have 3 candidates. I know them all. That seat currently is in the hands of Mitch McConnell, who's been in the Senate since 1985. A complete legend. And so whoever fills those shoes, they got big shoes to fill. Kentucky's a small rural state. We only punch above our weight in Washington when we elect the right personalities and people who know how to do things, know how to communicate, and know how to focus long enough to amass political influence. And so he certainly embodied all those things. But I don't really have any announcements about that at the moment. But I do believe this. I think the seat will remain in Republican hands. And I tend to think politics is a team sport. Donald Trump's the head coach right now. He hasn't weighed in on this yet. But I, like every other Kentucky Republican, am waiting to see what the coach has to say about it. But I think if he gets involved in it, it will be a determinative endorsement.
Got it. Okay. Why don't we start over here? If you just say your name and affiliation, if you're comfortable. If not, that's fine.
Sure. Thank you for your time, Mr. Jennings. My name is Ekaterina Kuzina. I'm a current EDM student over at Hugsy. I'm studying education policy and data analysis. So naturally, my question to you is going to be more along the line of the Department of Education. And to be more specific, you were working with President Bush in the White House when this legislation was passed. And it was a major federal effort to promote both accountability and achievement gaps, but it was only possible with the role of the Department of Ed. And now as we're seeing a lot of Republicans are asking to eliminate the department, if not decrease its scale. So I am curious, given your experience, what direction you see education is heading, but more importantly, what lessons did you learn from the passage of No Child Left Behind? And to see if that bipartisan commitment in education could ever truly come back.
Good question. I will give you a political campaign anecdote from 2004. I ran the president's campaign in New Mexico. He lost it by a few hundred votes in 2000, and we won it by just a few thousand votes in 2004. One of the reasons is because of this issue. And a lot of Democratic-leaning voters, many of them Hispanic, believe that their schools were failing their communities, and they believe that President Bush was going to bring some accountability to that. It was a very persuasive message, accountability in public education for poor and underserved communities. And so he had a real passion for it, and I think people sensed that this was, to him, more than just a political talking point. He actually believed in the power of education to change lives, and seemed to be agnostic about the politics. I just want to help people by giving them a better education. And it really worked for us in the campaign, and he believed it with all his heart. In the last 20 years, and even before that, a lot of conservatives were disdainful of the national education bureaucracy because they believed, and still believe, that it does more to serve teachers' unions than it does students. And especially since COVID, when we saw teachers' unions working with the government to keep schools closed, conservatives have hardened their views on this even further, that these education bureaucracies combined with union bureaucracies have absolutely not done what's in the best interest of students. I believe that. And so I think what you've seen in the last few years is a recommitment by some conservatives to believe that federal education bureaucracies simply don't work, and it's best left to the states. And President Trump, of course, as you know, announced that he would like to close the Department of Education. This has been a Republican position for a long time. He actually did it, or at least announced his intention to do it. There's a lot of evidence to back up his position. Test scores are atrocious. Reading scores are atrocious. Science, math, atrocious, atrocious, atrocious. It would only be natural for someone to say, we spend all this money and we build all this bureaucracy and we have all these terrible test scores. Why? And I think And I think that the future of this for Republicans is to try to invest in education, but at the state and local level, and eschew this idea that we need one federal bureaucracy dealing with whatever it is they deal with. Because the general consensus in the Republican Party is it just doesn't work. It didn't work. And when a bureaucracy is co-opted by people who care more about self-perpetuation and self-preservation than they do about the students, then it has failed. So I applaud your being in education policy. We need people to figure out why our kids can't read and do math. I got 4 of them. And I'll tell you, we lived through COVID at home. 2 of my kids have learning differences, and they closed the school. And it was, and look, I'm not here to whine. You know, I have resources and time, and we were able to muddle through. But I think about all the parents out there who did not have resources, who did not have time, and who did not have the wherewithal or the knowledge to understand how to help their kids when their schools were closed. For many kids, schools are the best thing that happens to them all day. You know, they're being neglected at home, they don't have something good to eat. Close their school and you take away that stability in their life. It's easy to see why suicide rates are spiking, why test scores are down, and why we have this generation of lost souls. And so I think any good government actor would naturally look at this situation and say, why and how has this bureaucracy failed? So I hope you find your place, because it seems to me like you want to help kids. And I think we need more people in education who do. Thank you for your question.
Thanks. Let's go over here.
First of all, thank you for taking the time to be here today. My name is Tucker Coombs. I'm a second year here at the college studying government from the great state of North Carolina.
Hey.
But with the Senate and broadly Congress as a whole losing members, such as my own senator, Senator Tom Tillis, as well as others such as Senator Romney, Sinema, Portman, even Senator McConnell and Manchin, and others who've been willing to work across the aisle, do you think that there's still room for genuine bipartisanship in Washington, or has the incentive structure become too broken?
No, I do. I think especially in the Senate, they still have the filibuster. Most things still require 60 votes. I'm actually a little worried, you asked about the shutdown, that part of the Democratic ploy here is to try to trick the Republicans into ending the filibuster, which would be a disaster for our country. And a disaster for people who want bipartisanship. It forces the two parties to work together. It's rare that any party has 60 votes or more. So, yes, I do think there's room for bipartisanship. There was a bipartisan group on the floor the other night trying to reopen the government, in fact. So, and I still think many voters want leaders who fight for their values and fight for their principles, but also know how to get things done when working with the other side is the way to do it. And so I think there's room for deal making. And we have a closely divided government. You know, the Senate is close, the House is super close. Yes, I do think there's a role for bipartisanship. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to give up on your values, but there's a role for senators and congressmen who would rather legislate than bloviate. That won't be everybody, you know. I mean, some people would rather be more messaging vehicles, and some people would rather be more behind-the-scenes operators. But especially for the behind-the-scenes operators, I don't do much political consulting anymore, but one of my close friends and longtime clients is a guy named Congressman Brett Guthrie from Kentucky. He's the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee. I think one of the nicest members of Congress, and if you asked around, one of the people who earnestly and most genuinely tries to work with people from both parties to move things forward in a very large and contentious committee with a broad jurisdiction. So I guess I'm a little more optimistic on this than I sense in the tone of your question. But to me, some of it is wrapped up in the rules. And the rules of the Senate demand bipartisanship. The rules of the House do not, but the rules of the Senate do. And it would be a danger to change them, I think.
Thank you.
Yep.
Let's go up there.
Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Morgan, and I'm a freshman at the college. My question has to do with media institutions for which the trust in the country is at historic lows. I wanted to know what the reason for that you think is, and what commentators and other people in media institutions can do to restore trust in those institutions.
I agree with the premise of your question. Confidence is low. I think more people have no trust in media than have a great deal or fair amount. That's what the polling data tells us. And I think at the same time, media is having a crisis of trust. They're also having a crisis of competition. You can get a lot more information from a lot different places now than you used to be able to. One of the reasons for this is this crisis, this lack of trust, is that I think a lot of Americans, and I don't think it's confined to one party or one ideology, have come to believe that a lot of media is more interested in getting you to believe in a narrative than getting you to believe in or understand the truth. I mean, in media, what are we selling? It's a business. What are we selling? Trust, credibility. If you don't believe me, or if you don't think I'm credible, or if you don't think I'm honestly trying to tell you the truth, you're not buying it. And I think, sadly, that's what's happening. And it brings me no great pleasure to give you this report. I work in the mainstream media, and I strongly believe in the need for a free, trusted press. But we don't have a trusted press right now. So we have a press, I think, in some cases, that's more interested in advocacy than journalism. There's nothing wrong with either, but you can't pretend to be one and act as the other. So I think the way forward is to rethink our relationship with our consumers. Why don't they trust us? Why are they looking elsewhere for information? Why is this YouTube channel more interesting than, CNN right now? Asking hard questions, self-reflection, and maybe just a little bit of humility when we get it wrong would help. I think you've identified a core issue. At the same time, I still think there are amazing journalists at CNN and other places doing amazing work. So I'm not sort of a throw the baby out with the bathwater, kind of guy on this. I think these brands have value. And I think they're still finding interesting things to do. I think one of the most interesting things CNN has done in the last year is put this 10 o'clock debating show on the air, this Abby Phillip debating show. You got anybody in here watch this show? It's a great show. It's the only debating show on television. Most other cable is 6 people sitting around agreeing with each other, which is super boring. This show puts actual live human beings who disagree at the table to have it out. Everywhere I go, I hear 2 things. I don't really like you, but I like the debates. Or, I love you, and I love the debates. The commonality is the debates. So I also think part of the way forward is, if you can cast it correctly, more debates about the news of the day done in good faith, I actually think would restore credibility and trust in the corporate media. It might surprise you to learn that my 2 best friends at CNN are David Axelrod and Van Jones. I was with Van twice this week. We had some public debates together. And the reason that we're close is because we open our hearts and our ears to each other before we open our mouths, which is a good rule for punditry, and it's a good rule for life. But I think the more people that you engage like that on television and in cable news, the more people will trust it, because they're speaking from a position of experience and thoughtfulness. I think when you cast more people who have no experience and apparently are thoughtless, then you're reducing your credibility. Casting makes a huge difference. Framing makes a huge difference. What do you choose to cover? What do you choose to ignore? Who do you choose to interview? All of these choices ultimately make up your credibility quotient, and right now ours is low. But it could be better, and I think that there are ways forward. The reason I'm at CNN is because I think it's good for there to be a conservative there. It's better for American public discourse if we're not all isolated from views that may challenge our priors. It's why this forum is good. It's why the IOP is good. It's why these kinds of settings are helpful. To be exposed to other points of view. I mean, I treat my job, I'm an opinion commentator, of course, but I treat my job like a journalist. I say things that I believe are true. I try to base my opinions on facts. I try to give myself a healthy, broad diet of news on a daily basis. But it's hard work being a broad news consumer right now. And one of the other things I think that we should do is make it easier for people to get a broad spectrum of news and opinion, because the technology and the algorithms make it really easy for you to get in your bubble and never come out of it. And ultimately, I think that's bad for us as a business, but it's also bad for American information consumers. And so, I mean, what really is on my mind lately, Van and I were discussing this morning, the realities that we have. The reality on my phone might be vastly different than the reality on yours. What you see and what I see may be two different things. You may see things I never see, and I may see things you never see. So when you're not even operating from a shared reality, how can you have a reasonable debate about it? And these are the questions that we're grappling with as an industry right now. But we have lost a lot of trust, I think, because people finally realized that in some cases, narrative became more important than truth. And most people just want the truth. Thanks for your question.
I'm going to go to the next one, but there's a real authenticity at that table, at that Abby show.
It's great.
And it's not scripted, and I think it's an excellent example of how people can have differences, but then talk them through, right? And disagree. Sometimes it gets, sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't, but I think it's an excellent show. It
is authentic. There are no scripts. It is an authentic debate. And some people are better at it than others, and some people are able to be a lighthearted more than others and keep it friendlier. But we debate some weighty issues there, and I'm honored to have that seat, because to me, debating those issues at the end of a long day when everybody's absorbed the news, and then hearing Americans with different points of view sort it out, hash it out.
That's right.
We're not always looking for kumbaya moments,
No.
but I think the debates do reflect the debates going on in the hearts and minds of Americans. And so the greatest thing we can do is model civil discourse. We mostly achieve it. Occasionally we get off the rails.
Let's go up there.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. My name is Amog, and I'm a freshman at the college studying computer science. I think a big topic during your forum was on the importance of free speech, and you actually mentioned that as being one of the main reasons why you're a Republican. I was wondering if many of the actions by the current administration over the past couple months, for example, deals with law firms to maybe restrict who they can work with, deals with universities, or the threatening of removing Harvard's nonprofit status. Do you think many of these actions in combination could have a chilling effect on free speech and potentially set an unclear precedent for the future of free speech in America?
Yeah, it's not an invalid premise to your question. I'll take some issues one at a time. The debate over the late night comedy shows recently. I didn't really view this as a free speech issue. I viewed it more as a battle between networks and affiliates. Ultimately, he wound up back on the air. I viewed it more of look, obviously the chairman of the FCC got involved and said some things. I interviewed him on my radio show, actually. And, he couched it as all part of his regulatory duties under the 1934 Communications Act. I mean, that's how he viewed it. Jimmy Kimmel has a right to free speech. He doesn't have a right to have a television show on ABC that gets the worst ratings of the three, but no one's stopping him from speaking. Thought that was somewhat overblown, truthfully. Regarding the universities, I'm just going to level with you. Some of them, including this one, fomented some very bad things on campus as it relates to Jewish students, Jewish faculty, anti-Semitism, and so on. And the fight was worth having. You cannot allow these Jewish students and faculty and staff to be threatened, chased, made miserable, held hostage inside buildings, discriminated against on this or any other campus. The fight was worth having. Now, how the settlements shake out and how the courts decide some of these, the process will play out. But from my point of view, as someone who thinks the civil rights of everyone deserves to be defended, the idea that we would look the other way when it comes to rampant anti-Semitism in university environments, no way. So I think the fight is worth having on that front. The law firms, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, businesses engage in settlements and litigation and possible litigation and settlements with government and other entities all the time. And when I think about the issues regarding free speech in this country, I tend to think of it more through the lens of the press. I mean, Donald Trump takes more questions from the media in this country than any president ever has. Probably took more questions in the first 6 months than Joe Biden took in 4 years. So when I think about free speech and the First Amendment and access to our leaders, I don't think it's any comparison at all, what we have now versus what we had then. I don't think your concerns are invalid, but I do think some of the actions that he has taken were for very good reasons. And I think even Harvard itself has admitted that it made mistakes. Had he not stood up to them on this, they may not have admitted that, and maybe things would not have changed. But I think the rise of anti-Semitism in this country and in this world is atrocious, and we don't have to allow it. So I'm actually grateful that the president took it on. Good question, though. Thank you.
Let's go over here.
Hi, I'm Margaret, a sophomore at the college studying government. I'm here tonight with Harvard undergraduates for bipartisan solutions. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah.
My question is about civil discourse in everyday conversation. Obviously, some political conversations have become very tense. What do you think is the cause of that, and what is missing in civil discourse today?
I agree with you. I do think a lot of conversations become tense. And because we're dealing with a lot of weighty issues. You know, the issues that I debate every night do lead to a lot of tense debate on the air, a lot of tense conversation off the air. I mean, truthfully, the issue in the Middle East, the Gaza issue, probably created more emotional on and off air debate and conversation than anything I've dealt with in 8 years, other than just, you know, in the immediate run up to and aftermath of Donald Trump's elections. So I'm in agreement with you about the tension. I think the way you diffuse tension is by acknowledging at the forefront of conversations that, look, we may not agree. We may have a conversation or a debate and we just may not agree. And that's okay. We have to get comfortable with disagreement. And we're not always going to agree. But what can we achieve? We're not going to agree on the issue. Do I think you're operating out of good faith? Yes. Do I think you love your country? Yes. Do I think you respect me? Yes. I mean, these are the kinds of things that when I'm in a debate, I'm thinking about. And I always try to keep that in mind when someone is yelling at me from across the table or 4 people are yelling at me at the same time. Well, they love their country too. So, I think to me, the fundamentals of civil discourse almost all revolve around those questions. Do I view you as someone that is operating out of a position of good faith and out of someone who, like me, believes we're trying to move the country forward together? If you believe those things, it makes disagreeing a lot easier. But I do think a lot of people have trouble with disagreement. I think it's hard for people to, you know, have an eyeball-to-eyeball disagreement. It's a hard, conflict is hard. And because of the nature of our technology and our news consumption, we've made it easy to never be confronted with alternative opinions. And so when you actually get confronted with one in real life, it's jarring. That's why I love the 10 o'clock show. We're jarred every night. I think we'd probably be better off if we were in disagreements more often, get more comfortable with it. It's okay, we don't always have to agree. But the country was founded on speech and debate. The founding fathers didn't agree with each other all the time on all the issues. It's okay. We're not always going to agree, and we're not always going to walk away feeling great about it. But you know, we fight, we speak, we debate, we vote, and then we do it all again 2 years later. And it's been working for 250 years. And so I try to keep those things in mind. I also try just to not take anything personally. I have been out of shape a couple of times on the air, but I try to minimize it. I just try not to take it too personally, because I know people feel strongly about issues. And even if I vehemently disagree or think they have a ridiculous position, you still have to look at them as a human being that has put some thought into it, and they have a position, and you have to respect that too. So I just try not to take the debates too personally. And when they're over and we move on to the next thing, we move on to the next thing, and maybe we'll find some common ground 5 minutes from now. Good question. I'm glad you do what you do. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's go over here.
My name is Rod. I'm going to be leaving out my affiliation, but thanks for being here, Scott. Do watch the debate show pretty much every day, and
Thank you.
love your work on there. What I guess I wanted to ask, and really trying to bring a couple of ideas together, has more so to do with political retaliation. Pam Bondi recently suggested that hate speech was not protected, and she ultimately had to walk that back. But I guess given that the right has usually really talked about the idea of hate speech is protected unless it directly incites violence. How do you feel about some on the right, perhaps, and especially in the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder, pushing a little too far in terms of trying to crack down on real threats, but trampling on First Amendment protections? And adding to that is, I guess, what Trump suggested about potentially investigating George Soros and the Open Society Foundation as some of these organizations that fund left-wing violence, as he calls it. How do you feel about how you can tackle threats that are real and that we've seen over the past couple of years, and especially recently, without ending up in a place where you have political retaliation that masquerades as law enforcement?
Thank you. Thoughtful question. I think we have to be absolute guardians of free speech. I mean, they'll throw you in jail over in Europe right now. You put the wrong thing on Facebook. We do not want to be that place. I think when General Bondi said what she said, I disagreed with it and then was glad that she walked it back. I mean, Republicans for the last several years have felt like our speech was censored, our speech was restricted, that we didn't actually have free speech. And then to turn around and say, well, we may need to restrict the speech of others, I mean, that was not a coherent position. So we have to be guardians of free speech. And you even saw some Republicans say that that's not an accurate or a legitimate view. And so I was glad that she wound up in a better place on that. So I think you have to find the balance between being a guardian of free speech and being a guardian of public safety, truthfully. In the wake of Charlie's death, I have been frankly astounded at the number of people who took to social media to say hateful, heinous, violent things. And if I were running a university or if I were running a business or running any other public-facing institution, I would have to ask myself hard questions about whether I wanted employees who held and harbored those kinds of hateful thoughts that have to then interact with the public or we entrust to teach students. It was very troubling what many, many people said. So I understand the impulse to raise an eyebrow at that, truthfully. I'm not, I don't think the government should necessarily be dictating to private institutions hiring and firing, but I could understand why a private institution might want to not have in its employ somebody who has espoused ultimately violent or at least support for violent activity. And some of these things you have to admit were way over the line. And I was in New York City the other day when walking through a pep rally for people who were out there cheering for Luigi Mangione. I mean, I'm astonished by this. And so, I think we're grappling as a society right now with the balance between being guardians of free speech and being guardians of public safety, because I actually think there are some people in our society who have completely given up on speech and they have given up on debate, and they believe that the only way to achieve their political goals is through violence. I mean, they're writing the messages on the bullets. It's pretty clear. So I don't really fault anyone for thinking that something needs to be done about that. But in the pursuit of that, you do have to keep in mind that without free speech, we have nothing, even if it's speech we don't like. And so it's a thoughtful question. I don't have all the answers, but I tend to lean more towards being a free speech absolutist. But I have a very sensitive side when it comes to when people reveal themselves as it relates to violence. I just think we cannot look the other way. Looking the other way And what has it led to? Terrible things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we could probably get one more in here.
All right. Thank you for coming. I'm Mateen, first year here at the college. Earlier, you mentioned that the Republican Party is our best hope at preserving Western civilization. And frankly, for me personally, when I hear that kind of rhetoric, I think of Iraq, Syria, Yemen, etc., all of which I hope we can agree were operations that were destructive and probably increased stability in those respective regions. So my question is simply this: what exactly do you think that sort of preservation looks like, and why do you think Americans should trust the Republican Party, given this sort of track record on these issues?
Well, when I think about the preservation of Western civilization, I think about the preservation of human liberty and human freedom. And I think about the preservation of free speech. I think about the way women are treated. I think about the way people who can't defend themselves are treated. And I think about whether those populations are listened to. I think about all of these things, and I look at what's happening in Europe. And I also look at the group of people in the United States who seem to have come to the belief that the American experiment is ultimately rotten and should be ripped out and replaced with something else. And what they want to replace it with is fundamentally not what I think we all aspire to be here as it relates to freedom, liberty, speech, the protection of those who can't protect themselves. That doesn't mean we haven't made mistakes, and it doesn't mean that we won't make mistakes. All people make mistakes. Human organizations make mistakes. But I think the brilliance of America is we're an improving commodity. We are better today than we were 250 years ago. We're better today than we were 50 years ago. And we'll be better 5, 10, and 20 years than we are today. I don't believe the people that want to rip out the American experiment or the fundamental underpinnings of Western civilization believe that we are an improving commodity. And I believe that they would rather install an ideological framework that would be hostile to freedom, liberty, women, speech, and other things. And so I think the Republican Party is standing up for this. I think many on the left have been co-opted by an ideology that is fundamentally un-American and hostile to Western civilization. Not everybody, but some. And I think more than the day-to-day policy battles that we're having, as a Republican and as a conservative and as a proud American, I feel like it's my responsibility to support a political party that is standing up for a future that would defend those things that I think are the most important. Mistakes will be made. Mistakes have been made. But the greatest mistake would be to give up on the American experiment and what it represents in this world as it relates to human freedom and human dignity. Thank you for your question.
Well, Scott, we are at time. I want to thank you so much for being here, spending time here, answering questions, engaging. Give Scott a round of applause. Thank you.